I'm Neel Shivdasani. I'm an artist. When I don't make art, I work at a tech company. I actually work on AI, so it's weird that I make art with code and not AI, and it seems to confuse a lot of people, but yeah, that's who I am. I was drawn to generative art because I've always liked art in general, but I never felt like I had the skills to make art myself. And I started to see people making art with code and math around 10 years ago. And I was a coder, I was a math person, and so that really kind of connected with me. And then one day I stopped writing code at work and I realized I missed it. So I started thinking, this is the time for me to start making art with code and exploring the creative side of it. And that was maybe 6 years ago. I just had a drop on Art Blocks yesterday. It's called Motion Pictures. It's my first release in 3 years, actually. My previous release was also on Art Blocks. It was called Tropism. That was 3 years ago. And Motion Pictures is what they call barrier grid animations. So it's kind of 6 frames of an animation interlaced on a page, and you move a film over it, and it animates on paper. And I was inspired by a book I saw called Poe Motion. I saw it in a museum shop around 10 years ago. And I always was interested in trying to make a generative version of that because I thought it was something that hadn't really been done yet. That released yesterday, really excited about it. But yeah, I mentioned that it had been 3 years since I'd released something. At the time that I was doing more art and releasing more art online, it was just a really intense time for art. It was a really intense time in my life. I was working at a startup, and in trying to really engage with the scene, I kind of burned myself out a little bit. And so I took a break, focused on my career, focused on other parts of my life. I still made art, but it gave me breathing room, time to not feel like I had to chase it. And then when the time felt right, I felt really good about this project and what I had done. So I decided it was time to release something again. And there's no better place to do that than here in Marfa, surrounded by friends and people I've known for years and other artists and people who would really appreciate it. Marfa is a special place. I think it's special on its own, but also this weekend, the Art Blocks Weekend at Marfa is really special. I've never had a bad time when I've met up with any of these people. I spend most of my time talking to artists, but as someone who had not released something in a while, I don't interface as much with collectors and industry types, but it's always just so refreshing. Everyone's here for the same thing. Everyone's here appreciates the same sorts of things. People that I'll have just met will feel like best friends to me here. And it happens in this place where you're kind of surrounded by almost like a Martian landscape. It's 80 degrees in the day and 30 degrees at night. And apparently there's a tarantula swarm that comes through town once a year. And so it's just a really strange place full of strange people. And I'm just so glad that they welcome this group once a year. When I need to get creative momentum going and get into kind of my flow state, the best thing for me is to create a list of small tasks related to my project, related to my work, and to just knock them out. Pick small, easy things that I can make progress on, make small changes, explore a few different variables and parameters that I might change. Because I think that when I don't have that momentum, the wrong way for me to get started again is to pick a large thing to do. Because it can take a long time. It doesn't immediately feel rewarding. It can be frustrating. I might not see success for weeks. Whereas when I don't have momentum, the most important thing for me is to feel some sense of progress as fast as possible. And that's when, things start to feel really good. I realize that I'm making progress. I'll actually start kind of subconsciously and in the back of my mind solving the harder problems throughout the day. It becomes like a natural state for me. Sometimes, I'll go days, weeks, even months without creating art. And it's in those scenarios where I know that what works best for me is to just kind of pick some small tasks that I could knock out, do them, do the same thing the next day, do the same thing the next day. And then before you know it, I feel good. I'm excited about the work. I don't, deprioritize it in my life, and the momentum's back. When I'm starting a project, I don't really start with a specific plan of action always. I don't have specific parameters or variables in mind. I often have a direction that I think I want to go, something that exists in my head, and maybe it's like fuzzy or vague, and I try to go there. I do maybe have like a thought about how I will get there, but it's inevitably the case that where I end up is not actually what I had in my head. And then throughout that process, I'm discovering new sort of emergent behaviors or techniques I can employ. I discover unexpected fun things that might actually be more interesting than what I started with in my head. And it's through that process that I kind of solidify a project and what sort of variation and variables and parameters there can be. For me, the process of making art with code is one where I constantly revise what I've done, tweak it. In theory, I'd never walk away from my projects. The project that I released yesterday on Art Blocks Motion Pictures, it has a version of a piece of code that I wrote 30 days after I started making art with code. I started making art with code with a challenge to myself to make a new piece of art every day for 30 days. And within that month, I developed my own implementation of graph search, which is like a computational technique. And my project yesterday uses that technique. That's 6 years of work that I've tweaked over those 6 years. And so I think code is a really interesting medium because it can be copied, it can be modified. A lot of my work is just a tweak of a previous thing that I've done, of a previous project. And so I don't it's difficult to say that I know or don't know when to finish a project, because the project has essentially been in development for 6 years. Even if I actually realized what it was going to be, 6 months ago, and then again 6 months before that, I did eventually, decide that this is a thing that I'm proud of and is ready to be packaged and seen as complete. But the code that is a part of this project is probably going to be a part of my next project as well. You can find me on the internet. My website is neel.sh, neel.sh. My Twitter is dataneel, DATANEEL. And my Instagram is Neel Shivdasani, NEEL.SHIVDASANI.